Hello, this is Igor Stenmark of MGI Research. Welcome to Monetize Forum 2021. Our next session is focused on how companies integrate monetization technology components into an overall quote-to-cash solution. We often cite our Agile Monetization platform, or AMP, approach to quote-to-cash. AMP is a modular set of components for functions such as billing, CPQ, financials, CLM, and a dozen others, all tied together via a single integration bus. When we usually present this concept to companies, their first reaction is, okay, where can I buy all these piece components? Reality today is that no company can just go and buy the entire quote-to-cash solution off the shelf. You can buy some mini suites. You can buy some best-of-breed components. You will have to integrate these modules into an overall solution. And when it comes to integration, application integration used to be one of the most expensive elements of an enterprise systems portfolio. In the late 1990s, that number was about 65% of an overall application budget. So even today, this is a topic that tends to cause the most fear and skepticism. It is perceived as complex, brittle, high risk, and very high cost. And yet, over the last 10 years, there have been fundamental advances in how integration is accomplished in terms of efficiency, efficacy, and time to revenue. And many high growth companies have taken advantage of this transformation in integration in order to turbocharge their growth. Our guest speaker for this session is Mr. Jason Ross, who is the Chief Information Officer of software firm GetBusy, a UK headquartered company with global operations in Europe, Americas, Australia, and New Zealand. GetBusy built much of their quote-to-cash solution through integration. And so today we will look at their experience as a case study. As a CIO, Ross currently leads the information technology organization within GetBusy, with responsibilities for strategy, implementation, operations, and budgets. He has a broad range of experience in areas such as quote-to-cash, application integration, and customer service, among others. He holds a degree in computer science with honors from Anglia Ruskin University. Jason is joining us today from Cambridge, England. Jason, welcome. Really so happy to have you here, and looking forward to diving into kind of conversation with you about your experience with quote-to-cash integration. Before we launch into a kind of our main line conversation, can you give our audience a bit of background about GetBusy, kind of a scale and scope and focus of your company? What do you guys do?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Igor. Thanks for having me. As you mentioned, we're in multiple regions. We do three main product lines, all software, to our document management systems. So one called Smart Vault, primarily is in the UK and US, and that's an online document management system, SaaS system. We've also got Virtual Cabinet, which is our enterprise document management system, primarily in the UK and Australia and New Zealand. And we have our GetBusy product, which is our namesake, which is a new communication tool. Across those three products, we've got around about 130 staff across all three regions. That's roughly the size of our business. And the enterprise model, Virtual Cabinet, is where we really focus on our quote to cash because of the complexity around the implementation and the product offering as well.
Thank you. So looking back now, well, kind of, if we were to look at your quote to cash stack, what does that look like? What are the key tools? What are the key elements? And what is your strategy in this area? Were you focused on leverage kind of complete suites, or kind of going for best of breed solutions, point solutions, or did you apply a hybrid approach in this area?
Yeah, so it's a good question. So our quote to cash process 10 years ago was in our own homebrew ERP system. We're a software house, so we've got developers and we wrote that system ourselves. And so therefore our quote to cash process is mature today, but our approach was more strategic about implementation and change rather than what tools we were using. So we started off by moving the sales team to Salesforce, and we needed a CPQ system to be able to do the quoting, as complicated as it was in our bespoke system. So we chose a system called Deal Hub to do that. So that was our first step. First step was Salesforce and Deal Hub. Then what we needed to do was also move the billing element to it. So we needed to hand that off to our consultants for delivery, so they could go and actually deliver the software. So they were enterprise based, so long sales cycle, long implementation time, sometimes months or years. So what we did was we looked at NetSuite, and we brought NetSuite in from a billing perspective, and we needed to integrate that with Salesforce. And so therefore that was a tricky one, because they're both strong powerhouses. Which one is the master, and how does that flow? How does that information flow? And bear in mind, our staff came from one single ERP system, so they were used to having every piece of information at their fingertips, whether, whichever side of the fence it sat on. And then we introduced Zendesk from a support perspective as well into that category. So those are our main tools. So we have Zendesk for support. NetSuite, if you like, is the heart. So it's where our billing is done, where our general ledger is done, and all of our subsidiaries, where all of our businesses are. But for our enterprise business, that's where our billing is done, and then our sales is in Salesforce, like a lot of people.
Right, right. And how did you tie all that componentry together? How did you approach that?
A good question. Again, it was a tough one. Actually, our NetSuite, the procurement of NetSuite, part of our requirement was that we had to have integration with Salesforce, and that was that was as much of a feature as it was to have a general ledger, because I knew that was something that we needed to tackle. Also, with experience of native integrations, we were very, we were concerned that with native integrations between applications, that they work in one way. There's not a lot of flexibility in them. So the experience that I've had with connecting two large applications together, sometimes with native integrations, you're basically turnkey. So you turn them on, and then you've got a couple of options, and that's about it. We're coming from our old ERP system. There was a huge amount of bespoke effort there. We have resellers that sell our product for us. All of that if I'm honest, it sent shudders down my spine. So what we did was, part of that process is we come across a product called Celigo, and we used Celigo to basically to create the highway between Salesforce and NetSuite and Zendesk. So if you create a customer in Salesforce, if it meets a certain set of criteria, we create a sales order in NetSuite at a click of a button. If it is a manual process for someone winning a deal, we don't automate that at enterprise level. So what happens is that sends information to NetSuite. NetSuite sends it on to Zendesk, all using Celigo connectors and integration. And that Celigo tool then becomes just as important as those other applications in our stack. It's another application, it's a platform, rather than just a line on a whiteboard, which is connecting them all together.
So that essentially became your data bus, more or less.
Yeah, absolutely.
Bidirectional data bus. And so I guess you're not moving data kind of in batch between the different systems. It's all kind of synchronized, and if not in real time, is in quick time, almost real time.
Yeah, it's very much get close to real time as possible. That was the other concern, was that we wanted to make sure that we didn't have to worry about sync and arguments over which one was the master, and particularly if people were changing information in one system or another.
Sounds good. Sounds good. When you look back at your original kind of quote to cash strategy and also your integration approach, would you do anything differently, and why? What worked and what didn't, and what did you learn from that whole integration experience?
I mean, it's been very successful. So I would do exactly the same as we have done. I would, having said that, I think where we've had challenges is around when we've had to import data en masse into some of those systems. That's where the challenge for us is around integration when we are doing data migration, because we didn't do it all as a big bang. We did the project in small chunks over a 2-year period. So at some point we were migrating data into one of those three applications, and at that point you've got to be very careful about integration, because if you're migrating thousands and thousands of records, the integration, bless it, is going to do its job and send 17,000 or 100,000 records the other way. So I think that's really where our challenges came. That to do it again, we would plan our migration better. So in a simple example, I would make sure that when I migrate my NetSuite client data, I would be migrating it already with my Salesforce links in it, rather than letting the integration do the linking for me. But that's probably too much detail for this.
No, but it's practical approach, obviously. When new requirements come up and you have to integrate new piece parts into the overall quote to cash solution, do you guys have like an overall strategy, or do you pursue a more tactical approach as things come up?
We have a strategy to make sure that, because originally we only did this for the UK and the UK virtual cabinet business. Last year, just before first UK lockdown of the pandemic, we implemented Australia and New Zealand into this as well. So that required quite a big change. That was different currencies, it was different fields, different sales reps were coming on board. So we had a strategic path to get to maturity. Now we're at maturity, we're very reactionary on changes that the business might want to make. We're an enterprise business, but we do sell new modules all the time. We come up with new modules for our products all the time. So sometimes that comes with different billing elements. We now do direct debit monthly options for our customers, whereas we never used to, and puts stress higher on doing more regular transactions. So the integration has to be able to cope with that, or maybe categorize it. All of those things do end up changing Salesforce and NetSuite on a regular basis.
What kind of, when you look at integration specifically for quote to cash, what kind of resources do you have committed to this right now in terms of staff, budget, additional tools, and who owns integration in your shop?
Well, we have a team that I'm in here in the UK that look after all of our systems for all of our products, and we have myself and one other member of staff, and his primary responsibility is to look after Celigo and a lot of the other integrations as well. So that's sort of, we've got one person looking after him. He also deals with change and requirement shifting and things like that. But the changes are relatively easy to do when you've got a platform rather than something that you're trying to change code in, for obvious reasons.
Yep. Yeah.
Control. We go through change control internally, but it's our own change control that we're trying to make sure people follow the right process, so we can go through that relatively quickly. And we have sandboxes for all of our systems, so we do it in the sandbox. But for example, if we want to come along and create a new currency, let's say we're starting to do stuff in euros now rather than British pounds, that is a very easy test and change to do in the Celigo product, because it's a point and click interface, and we can create mappings between the two customizations, or even a third one with Zendesk. So we can come up with our own customization in the integration as well, very, very quickly.
Good. Speaking of change management, so integration used to be years ago was discipline where you take two systems, you freeze the design, you build the integration, pray and hope for the best, because if one of them changes 1%, it's like a physical brick and mortar bridge. Things all of a sudden move and the building is no longer stable. So for a modern company like yours, for a high growth company, that just seems to me completely unworkable. And given kind of the depth of integration requirements that you guys have, how do you guys manage change when it comes to integration?
Yeah, well, most of the change is established by us through support. So unless it's a business change request, which we're usually from our department are in driving seat, usually it comes from someone saying this isn't working, or why has this record not got this information on it? And then we look back at the integration to find out whether it's a cause of integration or whether it's a problem in NetSuite, Salesforce, or some form of customization that we've written. The change management is relatively straightforward for us to do when we've got a tool that's fitting the bits together, rather than us having to speak to developers about, whether there's a field that's capturing API. You get detailed logs with Soligo and other tools like Soligo, one way or the other, and you can troubleshoot it very quickly and apply a change. Usually, we apply the change as part of the fix to an issue. It's very proactive though, Igor, I will say, compared to being reactive, because these tools know about the problems before the users do, which is unlike normal integrations that are silent, that just happen in the background, and only when a user puts their hands up, it will be 9 months later or something, that some record didn't sync that they've not found. With these newer tools and with reporting, and particularly I'm talking about Soligo as an example, but other integration tools like Zapier and Segment that have all got reporting tools, and they all flash warning signs on us as soon as these things go wrong. So we can jump on it, and we jump on it usually before the users are aware of it.
So it's a very different experience from what companies used to go through 15, 20 years ago. Sounds like that. Yeah. What are your plans to expand integration? What's on your wish list? Are you bringing in new systems, new capabilities? Where do you have kind of new challenges?
Yeah, I mean, our challenges are, we like to keep evolving. We like to try and stay in sort of front of the innovation curve. We, to be honest with you, we're looking at trying to integrate our own GetBusy application into as much of our own product offering to our customers as possible. It's something we sell our customers, so we want to also integrate our own tools into our business processes. And that's a new communication tool. So it's, instead of sending someone an email to do something, we'll send them a GetBusy to give them an actionable task. So we're looking at integrating those into our processes as well, rather than having emails do it.
Yep. Yep. Let me ask you a bit of a side question here. So as a growth company, what did you guys learn through a pandemic cycle, and specifically as it applies to quote to cash and in general too, about your workplace, workforce?
Yeah, I think, well, we learned that we did the project at the right time, because we used to have a scenario where before we had these systems connected, the sales team would often be, tapping people on the shoulder or ringing someone up or saying, I won this deal, can we convert it? Because it had to be checked, and this sales manager was involved. So having these new tools during the pandemic pretty much meant that the system was driving all of the communication, and so we didn't have to worry too much about personal, manual steps. So that definitely helped from an integration perspective. I knew that our finance team could operate purely out of NetSuite. I knew that our sales team could operate purely out of Salesforce. I knew our support team could operate purely out of Zendesk. We didn't have to worry about them putting their hands up or having to communicate with other people. So not that we have a problem with that, but it would have been very difficult during the pandemic if we had our old systems, put it that way.
Right, right. In closing, what is there like one thing that every company should know about GetBusy, but we don't? What's your secret?
I think we're very agile, so we're fast moving, and we like to always try and constantly innovate and use tools and learn from others as well, which is why we do things like this, actually, because we find there's a shortage of people sharing how they tackle these sorts of problems, and we feel that we're definitely a company that likes to share what we do as much as possible, and that way then we can help others. That's where we're at. And obviously with our own tool to drop that in, our own GetBusy tool is something that we'll be making quite big changes in the way people do business. So it's been very successful, and we're looking forward to pushing it out.
Jason, many thanks for joining us here today. Really appreciate your participation. I would encourage everybody who is listening, send your questions to Jason, any kind of Q&A, and enjoy the rest of Monetize Forum 2021. Thank you very much, Jason. We hope to see you again.
Thanks very much for having me. Thanks.